What's up, everybody? Sam Shaw here from Wall Street Mastermind. Back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Ethan on with us. And Ethan is one of our students who just recently finished going through the summer 2023 recruiting process and, had a very successful outcome despite, having to overcome certain challenges, which I'll let him get into himself here. But, he came to us. Geez, what was it like at the end of June of your sophomore summer, right? Summer after sophomore year.
Really late.
Yeah. So really late. So he came to us end of June, summer after sophomore year. And what are we now? We're in September. So really like within 3 months, basically, he's basically already done with recruiting. So wanted to get him come on here and talk to you guys. Because I know for a lot of you that are listening out there, you're probably going to find yourself in a similar situation where, you just start recruiting a little bit later. And so I want him to like kind of walk us through like how he was able to do what he did. And hopefully that helps you guys a bit as well. So anyway, Ethan, I don't want to take all the words out of your mouth, but thank you for joining us. And maybe to start, if you can, I already kind of talked about a little bit, but if you can introduce yourself a little bit, so people have a sense for your background, your profile, and kind of like just where you started.
Yeah, so my name's Ethan. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, roughly 30 miles directly west of the city. I've always wanted to kind of go into investment banking, since I was younger, because I have a mom who was always in banking, and I would always hear things like, oh, investment bankers this, investment bankers that. So obviously kind of piqued my interest as to what it is and, how to get into it. So kind of moving into the college atmosphere, I go to Indiana, double majoring in both finance and accounting. And I try to keep a pretty good GPA in both of those. But, going into IU, the IBW is highly touted by, everybody internally and externally within investment banking. I took the class, the prereq for it, and, I didn't put, the full effort in as far as the networking went for the application for IBW, the interview questions, the technicals. And that's kind of why I kind of still wanted to go into it, but I didn't have the right outcome. And then I had to kind of do all the heavy lifting on the back end. But that's a little bit about me.
Got it.
Banking.
Okay. So, I mean, I think for those in our audience that go to Indiana, they're going to be very familiar with what you're talking about. For the rest of our audience that don't go to Indiana, just to clarify for people a bit, IBW basically stands for Investment Banking Workshop, right? Which is like this famous investment banking, I don't know, do we call it a club? Like it's basically like a famous student organization on campus that's run by a former banker, right? And he's been doing it for a long time. And historically, basically, if you are in IBW, they have like a very good placement rate, right? I heard it's come down a little bit, but it's still quite good, is what I heard.
They're placing at a lot of bigger firms because they have a lot of good contacts, and it kind of cycles through year to year. Like a new analyst would love to recruit all the kids out of the IBW because they were in that group and help others just like them.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. My old boss at Square, I actually didn't realize this until recently because I moved to Seattle and he's also in Seattle now. He was in like the second class ever at IBW. So he was like, he knew like basically those very early day people. And what he said was like, yeah, this banker just like in the beginning, he was like helping out those initial cohorts, like just for free. And but what he made them promise was like, once I get you in, you got to help me get everyone else in that's younger than you. And then like he literally went on Wall Street and like hit up all of his connections and like, you guys got to hire this person. And like, that's how it all started, which is like pretty epic. Right. But regardless, so long story short, if you're in IBW at IU, I would say it's like as if you go to a target school, because you like most of the investment banking alumni from IU came out of IBW, right? And then they primarily, I don't know if this is your experience, but I've worked with other IU students, but they primarily will only help IU students that are from IBW, like in terms of like networking and referrals and things like that, right? And so basically, like if you are not in IBW, then essentially it's like you go to a non-target school because you don't have that many alumni you can reach out to, and the ones that are working on Wall Street, like they're kind of reserving the referrals that they have for the kids that are in this organization, right? Did I kind of capture everything, or is that anything inaccurate?
That's a pretty accurate description. You
Okay.
know, usually when I'm networking, I would always get the question, "Are you an IBW?" Or and then I'd have to say no, and then kind of conversation would move on from there. But that's a pretty good description of how it all put together.
Yeah. And so like, obviously I think a lot of schools have similar organizations like this. Just like I call them like investment banking feeder clubs. But I think IBW is probably like the most like, famous or well-established one in the country. And usually these clubs are like very selective, right? So this is the part that you were talking about. Like, I mean, at most schools, you apply for a club or you rush for an organization, like you just go through their rush or recruiting process and then do some interviews, meet the people, and then like you either get it or you don't. In your case, at IU, you guys actually have to like, my understanding is take a class for a semester. It's like a finance class. You have to get at least like a minimum grade of a certain level, or else you get eliminated right away. And then only after that, if you have at least a certain grade, then you get to go through the regular application process where you get interviewed and things like that, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's investment banking, capital markets, intro. I guess it's more advanced, to be honest. But class for that, and it's kind of your acceptance plays a big role, or a big role that's played is, how you actually do in the class. And then following how you do in the interviews that they do for the process.
Gotcha. Okay. So you made it past the class, but you didn't pass the interview process. Is that
I was
right?
already probably the middle 50% of the total students in the class, but I didn't put in the effort required for the whole interview process. So I thought I would go in and be like, oh, I got this. It's just another interview. Looking back, probably shouldn't have done that, but you know what? Everything's played out so far perfectly.
Right. So my understanding is that like the class sizes are getting like bigger and bigger now, right? And then like it's gotten so big that they had to they created a second thing called like IB seminar instead of IB workshop or something, and that's for like
they added the seminar.
Yeah, which is for like people that didn't quite make the cut for the investment banking workshop, and then they give them. I don't know the difference between the two, but it sounded like IBW is better, and maybe it's like varsity versus JV or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like, I guess like to give people a sense of like how selective it was, like how many people sign up for this class, and then like how many people actually get into IBW? Do you know, like roughly?
Well, I know the class started at roughly 300 kids, and after the first week, 150 dropped the class.
Wow.
But it's pretty rigorous, just going through all the it's basically like a crash course of technicals, and some networking opportunities as well. I'd say, there's probably 75 to 100 applicants, and only I think 32 last year were taken, maybe 30.
Wow. Okay.
Pretty highly selective.
75 to 100 applicants, like 150 stay after week one, but some of them don't make the cut because their grades in the class weren't good enough, basically.
That, or we have a new, I guess, workshop called the Capital Markets and Banking Workshop. So it's more focused on, the capital markets outlook, the ECM, DCM type stuff.
So people that want to do that would just go to that workshop. I see.
Correct.
Okay. But that one is like way less competitive, it sounds like.
It's pretty competitive. It's just, they accept less, even less than IBW does.
Okay. It's a smaller workshop.
Gotcha.
Okay. So regardless, class starts from 300 people, then they whittle it down. People drop the class, it's too hard. Some people go elsewhere, whatever. Then you got to apply, go through the interviews. At the end of it, they keep around 30-ish. So like from beginning to end is about like 1 in 10 people that like make it into this workshop, basically. Right. But if you can make it into this workshop, then your chances of getting into investment banking is basically pretty high, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. So now everyone has context for like what we're talking about. So let's come back to you, right? So, okay, you didn't get into this investment banking workshop. I mean, how did it feel at the time when you just like, when that happened? Was it like, oh my God, like how am I supposed to get into banking now? Or like, is game over? Or is like, what was going through your head?
I was obviously disappointed, but I really wasn't completely held back. I knew I still wanted to pursue banking as a career. But the thing about the workshop is it kind of puts you on a platform to get ready for the whole recruiting process. And kind of going into the second semester, that's when they all start in January. They start picking up all the networking things. They introduce you to employers, new companies, stuff like that. They kind of run you through, evaluation techniques and everything that has to do with kind of the whole process. And, obviously I'm on the outside looking in. I didn't really know how to go about doing it. Obviously, my mom was in banking, so I try to hit up as many connections she could connect me with, and then try to further that dialogue with other employees at the firms. And it kind of wasn't really going anywhere. Did that for multiple months. I found it pretty tough to actually kind of keep in contact with those same people I spoke with. And I went abroad in June to do a summer internship. And kind of during that time, I was like, all right, well, I really would like to get an IB job, so I need to go full throttle. And that's kind of where, I heard of Wall Street Mastermind, and, I was really, really interested. I did a bunch of research, contacted Sam, and even went to like a midnight, it was 2 a.m. at the time in London for a midnight Q&A session as to like kind of what Wall Street Mastermind does, what it offers, and all things like that. And that's kind of how I got associated with you.
Gotcha. Oh, you're talking about like the Q&A that we do like once a month at the beginning of the month. Oh, it's like 5:30 Pacific, which is where I live, but that's like midnight your time, basically. Okay.
2:30 or 3 a.m. and I just set an alarm, woke up, and it was half drowsy, but I attended it, and
Wow.
questions.
Wow, that's dedication, man. I respect that. Okay, so I guess let's work backwards. Like, let's first talk about like, so what was the outcome of your recruiting process? Like, what offers did you end up with?
Yeah, so I ended up with 2 offers, one from DC Advisory, which is Daiwa Corporate Advisory. And then the second one would be Raymond James
Gotcha.
Healthcare.
Okay. And which one did you end up going with, and why did you make that decision?
I ended up going with DC because, obviously it's in New York City, and that was kind of a big, motive for me. I was a little iffy because, Nashville, I really enjoy that city too. For Raymond James, I guess just the kicker was the networking opportunities, or just, even full-time opportunities that could come from that, going out at night with friends from other firms and their friends that go to other firms. And, I think it's just the best place to kind of start your career and kind of get a good, kickoff to IB and even PE exits.
Yeah. I mean, look, I tell people this all the time, but I think Nashville is great. I've been to Nashville a couple times, but like, there's no place like New York, right? I mean, especially if you want to do finance. And I lived in New York, or not New York, San Francisco my whole life. So like, I feel like those are like the 2 coastal cities, but like, there's even in San Francisco, like, I don't think the energy is quite like it is in New York. And then like, yeah, from like a networking standpoint, there's obviously a lot more people in New York that are doing finance. And so if like that's the career that you want to pursue, then it makes a lot of sense to be there. And then like, not to mention, just as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, like, it's just fun. like yeah, there's no better place to be honest. And so like, yeah, I think it's a great decision. And like, DC Advisory is like, I think they're a very solid firm too. Like they're middle market, but like they have like 600 plus employees and offices all over the world and multiple continents. So like, it's a very reputable firm. And I think they primarily focus on M&A, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the whole international and cross-border type stuff, because I didn't really know anything about them at first until I went to London, and I came out of the subway trying to route my path to work, and I just see this big, beautiful building. And I'm like, oh, what is that place? And I just saw it on a plaque, and I went home, started Googling, and saw they're an international investment bank, and then kind of started networking from there.
Gotcha. Wow, that's wild. And then it came full circle. Like you actually ended up getting an offer from there. So there you go. So that's awesome. So I mean, I guess if we kind of walk people through how you were able to go from, not getting into IBW in the beginning to then like ultimately ending up with these two really, really good offers. Um, which I would say like, again, I think for people from your school, there probably weren't that many people like you who ended up getting into banking anyway after not getting to IBW. Right? My guess is you can probably count them on, I don't know, one or two hands. But like, what were you doing then prior to Wall Street Mastermind, like on your own? Like, were you already starting to prep for the recruiting process a little bit on your own? Were there other resources that you were using already? I mean, aside from, taking the finance class that was required for IBW, obviously, but like, had you done anything else aside from that?
I tried doing, or I kind of enrolled in a financial modeling course, how to put together a DCF, stuff like that, but it really wasn't, very detailed. It's more just plug and play and, drag and drop type of stuff. And it really didn't kind of bring out the technical portions of that. And then, I'd used like the CFI, definitions, used what I had from the class that I took the previous semester for the IB stuff. Then the 400 questions that everybody uses, the breaking into Wall Street type of stuff. But I didn't really think that was more just kind of, memorizing. It wasn't, learning the content through and through to where you knew it and were confident about answering questions like that.
Gotcha. So you were like, basically, it sounds like you were doing all the things that people were typically doing already. Like you took a financial modeling course, you read like the popular interview guides, the 400 questions, so on and so forth. But for some reason, like I'm assuming, again, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but obviously we're sitting here today. So like it felt like something wasn't enough for you by just doing that, right? Like what was that? And like what made you want to join something like Wall Street Mastermind? Because like not everyone joins something like Wall Street Mastermind, right? In fact, like one thing we always hear people say is like, well, I know plenty of people who got into investment banking without Wall Street Mastermind. So like, what do I need it? Right. So like, what what was it that made you want to kind of, get involved with Wall Street Mastermind?
Yeah, so I guess kind of basing it off that 400 questions, you could drag anybody off the street and have them memorize so and so questions like, oh, run me through $10 of depreciation through the street. That's three statements. It's like, oh, anybody can memorize that. But then when they ask a follow-up question, you probably can't answer it because you don't have it memorized in your head. And I kind of knew I had one super day beginning of June with another middle market firm. And it went all right. I knew most of the technicals, but they weren't really solid answers. I got through it all right, didn't end up getting that offer. And, it really kind of pushed me back a little bit. I was like, oh, I really need to, find something that'll, be that cherry on top, so to speak. And, I really wanted to get a solid foundation of all the technicals, know how to, polish off all my answers and kind of get everything to come full circle for me, as far as an interview went. And I knew that obviously interviewing was the biggest part. Of actually getting an offer. So I really wanted to put everything I had into kind of preparing myself for each and every one of those.
Yeah. And that was beginning of June. So that was like basically right before you joined us, essentially. Okay. Right. Gotcha. What about like, I mean, so I agree with you, like, cause a lot of people, the way they do use those guides, I'm not saying guides are bad. Like, in fact, I think using the guides is part of everyone's process. Like you should do that. But to me, the guides are better off used as just like a question bank of questions that you can practice and test yourself with. They're not as good as like the thing that you use to learn with, right? Like learn the concepts in the first place. Like once you learn the concepts, then you want to test yourself and give yourself pop quizzes and whatever and see if you actually retain the information. Then I think the guides are useful for that. But like that's like a secondary thing. Like the harder part is actually learning the concepts, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of where you guys come in, where you learn all the foundations, you learn the basics, and then you can apply all of that to any question that somebody asks you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But like what about like the class that you had to take for school? Because like I assume taught you guys a lot of the same technicals, right? So like you kind of learned a lot of this stuff already before you came into the program. So was there like a difference in terms of what you learned or how'd you learn it? Or like obviously I assume you feel like you know this stuff a lot better now, and obviously you've gotten the results to show for it. But like, I think most people who are listening to this would probably wonder, like, well, what's the difference? Like, you already took a class. Why do you need to take another program just to learn the same thing again? Right.
Yeah, so I guess with the class, I feel like they kind of pushed you in at 100 miles an hour.
Mm,
It was really fast paced, and most people didn't know 90% of what was being taught right off the bat. And it was like playing catch up the whole semester. So it's like writing down equations and formulas, not really being able to apply it to anything, material. Just putting it in your notes, calculating. It didn't really, lay any ground in my head. It didn't even lay ground.
gotcha. So it's almost like they're kind of trying to do that deliberately on purpose to like weed people out, basically. It's like the 10% of the people that actually could keep up, those are like maybe the people that ultimately ended up making it in. And then like everyone else, just if you couldn't keep up, then sorry, better luck next time, basically.
Oh.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it's almost like it sounded like that was structured more as like a filtering process as opposed to like, hey, let's help you learn this in the best way possible and make sure everyone understands everything. Right. What about like financial modeling courses? That's another really popular thing that people do. You mentioned you took a financial modeling course. Which financial modeling course did you take? Was it like one of the more well-known ones, or?
I did it through Adventus.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They have they're pretty well known, right? I think. And so like I think this is like a big myth that most people don't realize, but I'll just ask you, like, did you utilize anything you learned in your financial modeling class in your interview process? Like, did you ever get asked to build a financial model?
No, the only question as far as that went was how would you rate your Excel skills on a scale of 1 to 10?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Obviously a 9 or a 10, but I'd say it was helpful as far as getting the keys down, the hotkeys, kind of learning the macro type stuff. But applying the actual foundations for stuff was not easy to do when you're looking at an Excel sheet versus just a piece of paper that you wrote kind of how to work through all the problems. It wasn't really applicable to the questions they're asking in the interview.
Yeah, I think like the way I explain to people, and this is like the takeaway that I want people to get at, is like, I'm not saying there's no place for a financial modeling course. In fact, like financial modeling is obviously a very critical skill if you want to become an investment banker. But like when you take a financial modeling course, what you're learning how to do is how to do the job versus like before you learn how to do the job, you need to first get the job, right? And then like ironically, maybe it shouldn't be this way, but it is this way. Ironically, the things, the skills you need to get the job are actually not the same as the skills you need to do the job, right? Like the skills you need to get the job is just like, you need to be able to verbally explain these concepts in a clear and concise manner to your interviewer. And it's not like, hey, here's a laptop with a blank spreadsheet. Now build me a DCF. Like they just don't do that. Right.
Exactly. They want to teach you. They just need someone that can understand the background information on what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Right. And so like, I always thought it was like, the way to think about it is like, if you can explain, let's take DCF as an example. If you can explain what a discounted cash flow is to your brother who's in 6th grade and knows nothing about finance, then like you're in good shape. Right. But like, if you can't do that, then like if you're just memorizing guides, or if you're like learning these hotkeys from these like financial modeling courses, you're learning how to do VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, whatever, like that's not going to equip you to be able to explain concepts like this to someone who like doesn't know anything about finance, right? It's just a different skill set, right? So I think like a lot of people don't realize that, which ends up wasting them a lot of time, because then like they spend hundreds of hours. Like some of these financial modeling courses are long, right? Like you spend 100+ hours watching some guy move around an Excel spreadsheet, and then like you learn a bunch of stuff that's great, but it's just not useful, especially when you end up not getting the job. Right? Exactly. And you end up never having to build a single financial model in your life, right? So like that all makes a ton of sense. So like on the technical side, I understand what you were doing. On the networking side, it sounds like, I think you alluded to this earlier, but you try to like network somewhat through like just connections that your mom had and things like that, right? That's probably something that other people are wondering about too. Is like, why didn't that work out? Because if your mom's already working in banking, then like, shouldn't that, make it a lot easier? Like for these people to like want to help you or whatever. It's like, where do you think, like, why do you think that didn't work out? I guess.
Well, I was speaking to more senior people because obviously my mom's older. And senior people might not have, the time of day where they could, really go out of their way to help. So I found it was kind of a lot of dead ends after, because you're speaking to the head honcho. I think it's when I went through the Wall Street Mastermind type of, filtering process, sending out emails, kind of speaking with the junior talent and kind of working my way up. I found a lot more success with that instead of kind of working top down, doing the top approach.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, having like a more strategic and structured way of going about your networking process to get the most out of your relationships with these people. I honestly think like the way you're describing it's like, I'm sure your mom had like some really great connections. In fact, like the fact that she was able to introduce you to senior bankers, like a lot of people would probably would love to have that, but it's just like you met them before you knew what you were doing, and then like it's almost like if you had met them a little bit later, then maybe it would have been different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of that is I didn't have a lot that kind of, carried over kind of same traits or backgrounds or anything like that. I just kind of had an email, kind of introduced myself. They introduced themselves. It wasn't like, oh, I'm connecting someone who was an alumni of IU or, somebody who played Division I hockey or whatever it might be with some sort of, similar background. I think it was kind of just going in cold and not really being able to carry it forward.
Gotcha. Okay. So then like that was all prior to Wall Street Mastermind. Then after you joined Wall Street Mastermind, like what did you do inside of our program to prep for this process and to work through this goal? I mean, obviously like you were already starting to interview even before joining, but like what made the biggest difference for you, I guess, after coming in? Like, or like what did you do with us that you would say are, maybe things that you couldn't have done on your own?
Yeah, so I think the two biggest things that helped me the most was the networking, processes that you guys recommend, along with, the technicals and mastering the technicals and being able to kind of put them forward to an interviewer. I think kind of moving through, filtering, people to reach out to, questions you should ask as far as networking goes, how to maintain a relationship after networking, asking for, future referrals, etc. I think that played an exponential, role in kind of how I went about, doing it. And I did that full force. I was, sending mass emails every single day, then responding to people who had responded back and sending out, Zoom invites or phone call interviews, Google Calendar invites as well. I think that's the best approach to go about it. And I was not doing that before I started.
Gotcha. So you just like, it sounds like you had a lot more structure to what you were doing and you knew exactly like what the order of operations was and like just how to approach whatever the next step should be. Right. And
yeah, it's kind of like a spider web. I was able to touch many different firms all at once. And I was at the center of all these interviews, whereas before I was kind of doing it like an assembly line. You just this. Hopefully somebody would respond, get back to me, refer me. It wasn't as well structured as I thought Wall Street Mastermind did it.
So did you see like a change in like the referral rate coming out of your networking efforts? Like, for example, I don't know, like, out of every prior to Wall Street Mastermind, I don't know how many people you try to network with, but like out of every like 10 bankers that you reach out to, like, X would help you before versus after it was like Y. Like, was there like a actually like material improvement or like what was that like?
Yeah, so I guess before, I'd keep a lot of the emails I'd send out short and concise. It wasn't really well written, I would say. And then, kind of going through the networking module, you guys posted a video on, what's the best way to actually email a banker? What's the best way to kind of follow up if they hadn't responded? which I hadn't done before. I'd never follow up on an email. And if I did, it was, not well written once again. And I think that's really what played into them actually accepting the 30-minute interview or whatever it was at that point. I think just kind of the way I go about contacting them and how I spoke to them was a big player in my success rate.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, these are all seemingly such simple things when we hear you talk about it. But honestly, it's like, this is the stuff that they, for whatever reason, don't teach you in school. Right. And so like, if you're just a college student who's never worked before and you're trying to network with, working professionals for the first time, like, you can't be expected to just like know it or just like figure it out.
Yeah.
Like someone has to tell you what to do. Right. Like, once they tell you what to do, like, it's not hard, it's not rocket science, but like, until someone tells you, it's just like, I'm sure before, when you read all your networking emails, they sounded just fine to you, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have written it that way, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's kind of like, I find that to be true with a lot of things during recruiting, which is just like, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So
I
a
think
lot,
in school, they touch on the big picture, but they don't really hone in on the details of, what should go into an email, or, what's the best questions to ask during an interview or a networking call. They don't really touch on that. They just kind of want to say, oh, you want to look presentable, you want to speak clearly, you want to know what you're saying, etc. But I think that, focusing in on every little detail of what goes into the physical process is what, really helps you in the long run.
So like, instead of just being at like this 30,000-foot view, getting really tactical and specific and into the weeds on like,
Exactly.
first do this, then do this, then do this. And so there's no like ambiguity, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that is what we try to do, is like, we try to be very clear and very specific about exactly what you need to, because like, yeah, when someone's just like, oh yeah, be this or be that, like, be friendly, like, it's like, okay, well, duh, but like, what does that really mean?
Like, smile more. It's like,
like, okay, like, but that doesn't really, like, it's not super helpful, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And then like on the technical side, obviously, I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about how, we're not big believers in just like memorizing the guides and, even taking financial modeling courses, but how did you learn the technicals once you were here? And like, I mean, like, how was that? Obviously you got a better result, but like, what do you attribute that better result to? Like, why were you able to just really improve on your understanding of your
Well,
technical?
it's like I said, again, I think you guys really focus on every little detail of what went into each of the, methodologies, calculations, and then just kind of the different aspects, like the behavioral questions surrounding technical questions. So it's like, what are some good candidates for an LBO? You're like, don't really know. You could focus, and then you give the answer, and then exactly why each one of them is a good answer following it. So you'd give a description on your answer. And I think that's kind of what, pushed me over the edge as far as, going into an interview confident with my technicals. You kind of focus on every little detail so that I could answer any question that was more broad.
Gotcha. So how is that different from like, I don't know, reading about LBOs in the interview guide? Like, because the interview guys will try to like explain to you what an LBO model is, right?
That's just, I think it's more just memorized questions. It's one answer, but maybe a question could have several answers. And you were able to kind of touch on every single one of them. And, they could ask follow-up questions, which that guide doesn't have. Like, you can memorize it, like I said, just like any other person. But if they ask follow-up questions as to, oh, what about this? You're able to actually know what you're going to say and why you're going to say it.
So basically, I think, to paraphrase what you're saying, the biggest difference is like, we're not teaching you guys specific questions, or we're not teaching you, like, here's how you answer this question. Here's how you answer this question. Like, instead, we're teaching you the underlying concepts behind the questions, so that as long as you understand the concepts, it doesn't matter what questions they're asking you. They're just all variations on the same concepts that you already know. And then so if you know it well enough, you should just be able to kind of like think on your feet during the interview, even if they change a number or they change the question slightly. And that's like that. I mean, that's pretty much the only way you can really truly be prepared, right? Because like, if you ever have to just like memorize specific questions, like, there's an infinite number of variations or questions that they could throw at you, like, you'll never finish.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you guys do a great job at breaking every, concept down to a fundamental standpoint where, you just feel confident that you can apply one thing to another. And it's just kind of works down the line that way.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, awesome. Um, was there anything about like, I don't know, like the format of the program or the way the community works or things like that that you found to be I don't know, unique or surprising or unexpected? Like I don't know what expectations you had coming in, but like now that you're on the other side, like kind of what was that experience like? Just kind of being a part of this community.
Yeah, it was great. And I didn't really know I'd be like added to a Slack group. I think that played a big role as far as, just learning technicals and behaviorals, certain deadlines that need to be made for certain applications, kind of seeking out your peers for advice. I may not know these people in person. They're not like my best friends or my friends for that matter. Like I'd never met them before, but I'd feel comfortable reaching out and saying, hey, I saw you interviewed at so-and-so bank. What was that interview process like? What was the outcome? What kind of things did they ask? What do they typically look for in a candidate? And it was just right off the bat, it was super inclusive, felt comfortable contacting anybody and everybody for advice and help. And I
Mm,
thought that was a big factor. I had no idea I was getting into either way coming into the
yeah.
program.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's one thing that one of my favorite things about Wall Street Mastermind that I really love. Can't take credit for it. I don't know how it happened. It kind of just happened organically, but like I feel like everyone's super collaborative and like the culture here is not like this cutthroat environment where it's like, oh, well, if I help Ethan get a job, then that's one less job for me. But like people are actually very willing to like share interview questions, share, intel on recruiting timelines and what firms still recruiting. And I mean, sure, yes, like alumni that are working at these firms, but also like even people that technically you could say are your competition because they're in the same grade as you and also recruiting for the same opportunities, like they're still helping each other out, right? Which I think is like a really, really beautiful thing to see. And it's kind of like ironically, it makes everybody more successful. Like when you don't have like that scarcity mindset and like everybody's winning together, right? Like a rising tide lifts all boats, as opposed to like everybody's only like looking out for themselves and no one's helping each other out, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can't really force that. It's just natural. I think everybody kind of understands that even if they help someone get a job, that might lead to them getting an offer from the same bank because now they have an in somewhere else or at that same spot. So I think it's a great thing kind of going in and being able to, reach out for help.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think the network effect is very powerful, and it's only going to be continue to be, I think, even more powerful over time as more and more people join Wall Street Mastermind. So I think that's definitely something that I'm very, very excited about.
Mhm.
To your point about having never met those people, I mean, we're gonna try to do a meetup in New York in November. So if you're around, you should come out.
Yeah, if I have the
um,
time, yeah, I'd love
yeah.
to.
So okay, I guess last question for you because I know we're out of time here, but uh, what's like one piece of advice that you have for people, who are like wanting to get into investment banking, like people maybe who are in a similar boat that you were just in, a few months ago, or maybe people who are like even earlier than that, they haven't really even started doing anything yet, but they're like thinking about recruiting for banking in the future, like now that you're on the other side, is there something, maybe something that someone told you or shared with you that really helped you tremendously through this process that you want to pass down to other people?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of take this quote from my hockey coach growing up, and it's do the work early. You can kind of interpret that how you like, but along the same lines, it's you want to do as much work on the front end as possible because it'll lead to the best opportunities following. If I were to gotten started with Wall Street Mastermind as a freshman in college, or even after the freshman year, I would have gone into this investment banking, capital markets course, knowing the foundations of every single one of those calculation questions we were asked, and that might have led on to better networking paths, and maybe even something even better as far as offers go. But I think kind of doing the work early is the biggest part, and don't be afraid to kind of put all your efforts into that because I think it'll pay dividends on the back half.
I think, dude, that's such good advice, man. Um, I swear I did not tell him to say that. I was like, you said that on your own, right? Like I think especially going back to your the fact that you come from a school that has an organization like IBW. I think like a lot of the IU students that we talk to, like sometimes we'll talk to IU students who are like freshmen, and then like their whole mentality is like, well, let me try to get an IBW first. Like if I can't get an IBW, then I'll come back, right? And I'm like, okay, sure, like you can do that. And I understand where they're coming from because they're like, if I can get an IBW, then I don't have to pay for something like this, right? But like we just talked about this earlier. There's 300 people in that class, and there's like 32 people that ended up getting into IBW. So it's like I know everyone always thinks like they're the smartest, but like to be honest, once you get to college, you realize like, oh, college is not like high school. There's a lot of other people that are like even smarter than you are, right? And so it's just like if 1 out of 10 people are getting in, like what makes you so certain that you're going to be the one to get in? Versus a different way to look at it could be like, okay, like IBW and Wall Street Mastermind can actually be complementary. And if I join Wall Street Mastermind first and learn everything that I'm going to learn in Wall Street Mastermind, now when the IBW process starts, like I'm going to be way ahead of the curve. I'm going to be in the top. I'm going to be in the 90th percentile. I'm going to be, better than everyone else. I'm going to be the 10% of people that are actually keeping up in the class. And my interview skills are going to be better than other people. My networking skills are going to be better than other people. All of that is going to come into play when I actually try to apply for IBW. Like that could actually change the outcome, right? That could actually get you into the club, and then like who knows? Then you actually have access to all the IU alumni network, right? Because and like we're not sitting here saying, hey, if you don't get an IBW, then you can't come back and work with Wall Street Mastermind, and then like you won't get into banking still. Like you will, but just like you said, like who knows if you could have gotten like who knows, like even a better offer or something else, right? And so like
Yeah, they're kind of synergistic with each other and, complementary, like you said. And if I would have done that even earlier, the results could have been, exponentially larger.
yeah, I think it's the difference between like I mean you didn't know about Wall Street Mastermind early enough, so that's like that doesn't I won't count that against you, but it's like it's the difference between I think like the most successful people, and I tend to see this more, to be honest, with like students from like target schools that go to like Wharton and Harvard and some of those schools. Like a lot of those students, like they already go to those top schools. And a lot of those students that come into our program from those top schools, like they're actually not coming here because they're worried that they don't have what it takes to get into banking, but they're coming here because their mentality is now like, hey, what's the bare minimum I have to do to just get into banking? Their mentality is like, how can I not only get into banking, but how can I get into like the best banks and the best groups? Right. And so it's like, do you want to be
intrinsic motivation?
Yeah. And so like, do you want to be the type of person who's like, how can I maximize my potential and like get the best outcome possible? Or do you want to be the type of person who's like, oh, well, I'll come back and get help if I really need it. But like, even if that means that I will end up getting like an inferior outcome in the long run. Right.
Yeah,
it's like,
I think putting in that work up front, trying to maximize your results is the best way to go about, doing banking. But I think doing just about anything else you do in life, whether it's homework, studying for an exam, I think putting in the work early and not, procrastinating it throughout time is going to, lead to bigger and better successes throughout your entire life.
For sure. Absolutely. Awesome, man. I mean, look, I don't think there's a better way to end this interview than on that note, but again, I think I just want to for those people who are still listening, I just want to say, like, if you find yourself in a similar situation, maybe you couldn't get into the feeder club at your school, or maybe you haven't tried yet and you're thinking about applying for one in the near future. Regardless of what your situation is, like if you want to put your best foot forward, if you want to maximize your potential and you want to like leave nothing on the table, and you just want some help and guidance along the way to give you a more structured and more efficient way of doing that, because we all know you're super busy as college students, then I want to encourage you guys to reach out to us and see if we're a good fit to help you. In fact, like our process now, it's very like open and transparent, and there's no pressure at all. Like we actually let you speak to one of the alums from our program first. So this will be like a successful upperclassman, junior or senior, who's already gone through recruiting, has already gotten an amazing offer, or sometimes multiple offers. And you can just have a free coffee chat with them, just like any networking conversation. Talk to them for 30 minutes, ask them whatever questions you want about recruiting, how they got their offer, any advice that they might have. And then like after that conversation, you can ask them about the program too if you want. or you don't have to. But like after that conversation, if you're still interested in working with us, then they can help you set up a call with our team. And that's literally the only way you could talk to our team right now is like you have to talk to them first, right? But like if after you talk to them, you're like, no, you know what, this is not really for me and I'm not interested, then hey, no worries. Like they don't care if you join or not. And you can just take the advice that they give you and go out and implement it on your own. All right. So like if you want to do that, if you want to book this free virtual coffee chat with one of the upperclassmen that have gone through our program, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you. All right. With that said, Ethan, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on here and share your entire journey with everyone. And I think this is really, really helpful and eye-opening for a lot of people, I think. And I think a lot of people who find themselves in a similar situation as you. And so can't thank you enough for that. And again, huge congrats on an amazing outcome for your recruiting process in just, man, really like less than 3 months, which is it went by just like that. And can't wait to see all the success that you have over the summer, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you bringing me on here to kind of tell my story. And, anybody who's hesitant about going into banking, not sure where to start, I guess Wall Street Mastermind's the best place to start and then kind of move forward with. I mean, it worked for me and it worked for a lot of other people that I've been speaking to. So I think if you have any hesitation, book that coffee chat. That's how I did it. And then, ended up with 2 offers. So one thing turns into another and, it'll be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. I appreciate you. And guys, thank you guys for tuning in. We're gonna end this episode here, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.